Kia ora koutou. Do not adjust your sets. It is me, Stephanie, the prettier half of 3-Minute Board Games. Jay is off compiling his top 100 list for the year, and I thought, I'm a nerd. I like making numbered lists too, so join me in front of the shiny new Kallax as we count down the 2019 Teffy 25. Pandemic.
We kick off with a great modern classic and one of the games that really got me properly into the hobby. I'm a huge fan of co-ops and disaster movies, so this was an easy sell the first time Jay put it on the table. The mechanics are easy to learn, but there's always space for things to go horribly wrong, and the roles are distinct enough to be interesting, while general enough that you're not ever sitting there going, well, I have nothing I can do this turn.
Legendary Encounters, Alien. I am such a fan of this franchise, I will even fight you about Prometheus being a great film. Ew, but the protagonists are all so stupid. Have you watched an Alien film before?
The setting and gameplay mesh really well, much better than the other version we've tried, which is X-Files. The aliens steadily advancing through the facility, bringing all the hazards of acid blood, facehuggers, and unstoppable queens, is frightening, but just manageable enough that you don't feel completely hopeless. Anytime I can deploy 4 different versions of Ellen Ripley against the Xenomorph Horde, I'm in my happy place.
Arkham Horror, the LCG.
We'll talk more about #problematicfave HP Lovecraft further up the list, so suffice it to say, this is an excellent entry in the pantheon of Fantasy Flight Lovecrafts. It offers all the fun of assembling a regular role-playing crew without the paperwork, the scenarios offer genuine tension and opportunity for each character to play their strengths, and as is proper, the women characters are OP as heck. Our crew included Fraser, who was on the first episode of the podcast, whose Jenny the Dilettante was a constant source of hilarity as her boyfriend Leo kept showing up out of nowhere anytime we needed someone to pilot a rowboat or carry something heavy. And I don't think any of us will ever forget the session on the train, which lasted all of 20 minutes because none of us appreciated the need to get a bloody move on when an alien vortex started swallowing up the carriages directly behind us.
Spirit Island.
A special one for the channel because it was the subject of 3-Minute Board Games' first ever video. Also, board games can be political? I really enjoy Spirit Island's subversion of those traditional colonizing games where you discover a conveniently uninhabited new land and set about strip mining its resources in the name of progress. The really different strengths and play styles of the spirits is another big plus.
Chinatown.
So, I definitely prefer co-op games, and if you lived with Jay, you would too.
There's a reason only one Hidden Traitor game made it on the list.
But sometimes I'm not just in the mood for a competitive game, I want it merciless and shouty. Chinatown provides that in spades, with genuinely open trading mechanics, and the sense that even if you're not winning, you can still take someone down with you by spinning a deal with their rival.
Zombicide.
There are a lot of zombie games out there, and very few I dislike, but none really captures the sense of being in a zombie movie or TV series like Zombicide does. The swarms are relentless, lone walkers can come out of nowhere just when you think you're safe, and sending one of your friends off as a noisy decoy to pull the abomination's attention is a genuinely useful, genuinely scary tactic. One day I dream of playing an epic game using as many tiles as we can fit on the table and every zombie type available, and if you'd like to see that happen, tell Jay to do it in the comments.
Freedom, the Underground Railroad. A card-driven game where you play members of the abolitionist movement trying to free slaves, make other white people care about freeing slaves, and dodge slave catchers who move identically to monsters in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Which is a bit on the nose.
I love board gaming's capacity to teach history and address complex topics in a really engaging way, and Freedom is one of the best I've played, especially as a Kiwi who doesn't get exposed to a lot of the detail and context and ongoing impact of this stuff as much as Americans should.
Potion Explosion.
One major plus I think board games have over video games is how they can engage your senses, especially touch. Being able to pick up and move the glass marbles in Potion Explosion and hearing them all click-clack together in their rows is just something you can't quite replicate on a screen. Potion Explosion rewards a little bit of strategic thinking, but adds plenty of chaos, and being able to use the special potion's abilities without sacrificing victory points makes it a much more light-hearted play than other games which have a more taxing cost and benefit mechanic.
Last Friday.
I often find hidden movement games frustrating. If I'm just after a relaxing fun time, working out the probabilities and pathways can be a drag. What makes Last Friday different, aside from the excellent use of its camp counselor slasher theme, is the turnaround section, where you, as the terrified but photogenic teen stereotypes, get to chase the killer down. Now, I haven't played as the killer yet, because we've only run this 2-person, and I feel like Jay would put me down like Jamie Lee Curtis in that video where she recreates the psycho shower scene, but maybe it's something to do for Halloween.
Takenoko.
It has a panda! And beautiful bamboo pieces that click together, and gorgeously drawn tiles, and a die you roll to tell the weather.
When the weather is bad, the panda has to run away and eat some bamboo to calm down. Relatable.
It's simply charming and light-hearted, easy to learn, and tactical enough to stay fun. And it has a panda.
Bananagrams. Let me be clear. I do not play Bananagrams. I win Bananagrams. When Bananagrams hits the table, I am a wolf among lambs, and the seas run red with the blood of my enemies.
It's Scrabble, but you're building your own board and pulling tiles from a common pool and can rearrange them at will, as long as you don't end up with word fragments or misspellings, which will turn your banana rotten.
Also, the Dragon's Tomb How to Play of Bananagrams is the single funniest thing I have ever seen. Kaleka.
This queuing for groceries in post-war Poland game could just be a dinky little strategy with any theme, but its setting and the fact Jay knows someone who was literally the Polish baby who got borrowed by the neighbours to get preferential treatment makes for some excellent black comedy.
This War of Mine, the board game.
Another bleak one, but at the more heart-rending end of the scale. This War of Mine places you in the middle of a modern civil war, and the survival mechanics are exactly that. Everything has a purpose, and everything could be the difference between life and death. I was a huge fan of the computer game, but there's something more confronting about having a book of pre-written scripts that sometimes simply don't let you affect the outcome of the horrific events happening around you. Jay has talked in the past about the game we played where one turn before the ceasefire, 2 of our party were out scavenging and met a group of soldiers. Who died came down to a dice roll, and it was completely needless. Which is kind of the point.
Black Orchestra.
Rounding out the dark political themes section of the list, we have the one where you win by killing Hitler. But it's not that easy, as it wasn't in real life, and you're again confronted by the harsh reality of a nearly unwinnable situation. You want to act, but will acting too aggressively sink the whole conspiracy? And it'll be easier to carry out your plan later in the war when his popularity is lower, but how many atrocities are you willing to let happen? As with Freedom, the Underground Railroad, the tension and excitement comes from the fact you want to succeed for more than just the sake of winning the game, because these stakes are historical and very real.
A lot of people don't like playing Nazi-related games, and that is a totally valid choice to make. For me personally, in 2019, Black Orchestra is almost affirming. It tells you that you may not be able to do it all on your own, but working together, each of you can make a small contribution that's the difference between success and failure at stopping an unmitigated atrocity from occurring. Android, the game that answers a compelling question: what if Cluedo, but Blade Runner?
Android puts a few spins on a fairly basic investigate the crime, find the evidence, identify the killer structure, with individual cyberpunk noir backstories for each investigator, an overarching conspiracy puzzle which can make the actual murder an afterthought, and the fact that you're not all trying to find one killer, you're each trying to incriminate and exonerate a completely different pair of suspects.
I love the world building, The really Blade Runner, ordinary Joe hopelessness against a backdrop of extreme technological advancement, wealth and inequality, and having multiple paths to victory that don't make you feel overstretched. We are now into the top 10 with Santorini, the purest example of simple puzzle mechanics creating an unexpectedly deep strategic game.
I broke this out at a gaming day at my mum's house, and a couple of older guys there initially sneered at it, but by the second turn they all had that chess grandmaster furrowed brow look going on, and we didn't get them away from the table until the pizza arrived. The adorable design, basic pieces, and dinky god powers make this seem like a cute little kids game, which it is, but boy, it'll melt your brain too.
And now for something completely different. XCOM the board game is a fast-paced, multi-tiered, real-time alien fighting strategy game, which also features one of the best implementations of an app attached to a board game.
It keeps the momentum up and adds a huge amount of atmosphere, as well as letting me indulge my love of barking orders at people. Unlike the computer game, you don't have time to overthink your moves, but when you have a team of players who are well in tune with each other, you end up reacting instinctively and balancing priorities in a way that feels stressful but satisfying.
Battlestar Galactica is one of our favourite TV series and also one of the first board games we purchased as a couple.
I said earlier I dislike hidden traitor games, but Battlestar is an exception because the idea of the hidden traitor is so integral to the setting. Pick your favourite character, roleplay them to your heart's content, and even if you never make it to Kobol because President Roslin threw Zarek out of an airlock on turn 1, you always feel like you've had a good time.
I have no idea what it would be like playing this if you weren't a fan of the show. Probably less fun, but that's what you get for having terrible taste. Azul!
It's a beautiful, tactile puzzle game with enough space for player interaction that you can't just focus on your own board. The tiles are weighty and satisfying to push around. The strategy, especially later in the game, is demanding but not brain-breaking. Like Santorini, it's abstract to the point you could recreate it at home using blank tokens, paper and a pen, but it really doesn't need any story or world built around it. It's just gorgeous and fun.
Thunderbirds.
Jay has waxed lyrical about this one, and I can only endorse everything he's said. It's very much like Pandemic, but with a much greater sense of choice and control in how you resolve the crises you face. And if you're a fan of the show, the nostalgia is palpable, and in contrast to Azul, makes the mechanics much more accessible. Nothing tops popping a miniature Lady Penelope into Fab 1 and driving across Europe to foil Dr. Godber's evil plan to steal the secret of Hodge and Berenda's new rocket fuel. And yes, silly voices are required.
Marrying Mr. Darcy. There is only one problem with Marrying Mr. Darcy. It is that every time I play this with my mother, she contrives to be Jane and marry Bingley and win. And part of that is my fault, because she's only just recently got into board games, and I didn't want to crush her spirit by playing too competitively the first few times. But then the last time we played, I was Lydia, and I had the opportunity to steal Bingley from her, and in a moment of daughterly weakness, I restrained myself, and she won by 1 point! 1 point!
Anyway, if you love the works of Jane Austen and would delight in telling your table mates that they had too much wine at the militia ball, disgraced themselves in front of Captain Denny, and died an old maid, this is the game for you.
Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. This is one of the first games Jay introduced me to when we were courting, which was a total power move on his part, but it is now firmly fixed as one of my favourites, much like him.
I already enjoyed Lovecraft's work, literal racist xenophobia notwithstanding, and no, he was not just a product of his time. And Arkham Horror is one of my faves for creating memorable characters whose special abilities really gel with their personal story. Jay's talked before about the great narratives you can build across multiple games, and in my case, it's the epic saga of Daisy, a shy librarian who discovered she can wield horrific amounts of power by reading the naughty books. This has carried through to every other Fantasy Flight Lovecraft game we've ever played, including Elder Sign and the LCG.
Daisy forever!
It's also really interesting to consider just how many of the women characters are OP as heck, and how diverse the cast has become over the course of its expansions. Maybe just a little bit of pushback happening there.
Block by Block, the Insurrection game. I love everything about this game. I love that it's modelled on 21st century protest movements. I love that the 4 factions you play are students, neighbours, workers, and prisoners. I love that you get to flip riot wagons and that the cop cubes are white.
The second edition made minor improvements, but it's remained fundamentally a game about reclaiming city space, collaboration, and if you play the semi-co-op mode, managing conflicting priorities within a mass campaign.
Can you tell I've worked in the union movement?
Block by Block elevates the idea of co-op gaming to me, because sometimes the best strategy is simply for one faction to throw themselves onto the front lines to allow others to build up their resources and infrastructure, and that has to be repaid down the line. You don't win unless all of you win, unless one of you really is just in it for yourselves.
Who's She? This is one that Jay saw on Kickstarter and did not bother phrasing, "Honey, should we back this?" in the form of a question. It did brilliantly, and that makes me so happy.
The concept is simple. Guess who, but it's all brilliant women, and you narrow down your opponent's identity using questions of accomplishment, not appearance. The only downside is they didn't include a symbol for turned out to be a horrible transphobe on J.K. Rowling. It's quite a quick play for adults who already know the premise and just need to get a handle on the different symbols, but you still learn a few things. It'd definitely be more satisfying with kids, which is my way of saying, buy it for every child you know. There's even a low-cost cardboard version.
Obsession. What can I say? Gosford Park is one of my top 3 films of all time. So that about wraps up the Teffy 25 OK I'll go on.
Obsession is a brilliantly designed worker placement game where the mechanics and theme of vintage English social climbing and flirtation tie together beautifully. The custom servant meeples are a delight. I'm sure it's fun to play straight-laced and serious, but in my experience, Obsession is best enjoyed with a few glasses of wine, lots of smutty wordplay, and accusing your tablemates of being secret American cads in terribly over-the-top accents.
They're also currently running a Kickstarter for the expansion pack. Hint, hint. Hashtag not sponsored, just a huge fan. Thanks for sticking through to the end, chums. It has been a blast creating this paradigm-shifting content for you and for the glory of the algorithm. Pandemic.
WMD!
Huh. Let's do that again when the box isn't fighting me. Knocked him over. Don't knock over the panda.
I didn't realize you were going to go completely deep in.
Yeah. I love that you get to flip Wyatt Ragans.
White Dragons.
I'm going to hand the reins back to Jay. If you'd like to see more of my face, do pop over to my own Ickle Baby YouTube channel, Opshop Romance, where I snark trashy romance novels for fun and not profit. How does it go? If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and check out our Patreon. Ka kite anō. And the seas run red with the blood of my enemies.